Hello, it's Elizabeth Busby here, the Director of Programs for the Theology of the Body Institute. Today, I'm going to be tackling a hot button cultural topic, which is not something I usually do, but I felt compelled to talk about this one, and that is, why are people threatened by this trad wife movement? I am joined by my baby Blaze, who is taking a nap and wants to hang out with his mama, but I thought it was actually kind of ironic and funny to be talking about trad wives and having a baby on YouTube. So I wanted to talk about this with Blaze here. Before I get started, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know what else we're doing here at the Institute, so that you can get these videos popping up in your own feed. And let's go ahead and get started. The traditional wife movement, the trad wife movement, if you haven't heard about it, if you Google it, it literally says this is harkening back to the 1950s era where women stayed home and they kept their house and they tended to their children and they baked bread and they cleaned and all this stuff. And there's a sense behind it that people are threatened by it, right? There's a sense behind it that this is a negative thing, that this is a bad thing, and people don't want to be going back to this space. I found a couple things interesting about this. Number one, well before the 1950s, women were at home cooking and cleaning and baking bread and taking care of their children and keeping their children alive, and men were not at home doing things. And this got started out of pure practicality. Like, men were the ones who went out and hunted and gathered, and women were the ones who stayed home with the babies and nursed the babies and kept house and all that stuff. Like, it happened organically originally, simply just because of the difference between masculinity and femininity. It's really only in the last, 100 years, 150 years, that there was even the opportunity for something different to happen, right? Like, there's an opportunity for formula to exist. There's an opportunity for women to go to work and be able to give someone else the opportunity to take care of their children while they're there. There's just all these different things that have developed that have allowed for something different than this traditional historic dynamic between husbands and wives. Now, I think that people are threatened by this for a couple of reasons. The first one is this tie to the 1950s. I've seen a lot of stuff, different videos, different articles, people claiming that by embracing these traditional elements of femininity, we're also going to have to embrace a lot of other broken stuff from the 1950s. For example, racism. Okay, racism is horrific. Racism is an extreme violation of the dignity of the person. It is straight from the pit of hell. It is awful and horrible. It smells like sulfur. It's got to go. To say that there are elements of the 1950s that, the 1950s that people are saying of women staying home and baking bread means we have to also embrace racism is baloney and ridiculous. That's such faulty logic. Racism's got to go. Please, Lord, let us have a day where that doesn't even exist anymore. Well, it will happen in heaven, right? We're all going to be in heaven together. But please let there be a time here on earth where the dignity of every person is upheld, regardless of any aspect of their personhood. Please, Lord. But saying that a woman's going to stay home, she enjoys staying home and baking bread, also means we have to embrace this element of this time in human history that was really broken. That's just horrible logic, okay? So let's just go ahead and throw that one out. Number one. Number two, I think that people are threatened by this idea because what a trad wife is doing at home, which is a lot in a lot of these videos, baking bread, teaching her children, cleaning house, those sorts of things. We have gotten it in our minds that those are inferior to the things that people are doing outside of the home, having careers in any sort of capacity, making money, all that stuff. We have gotten in our minds that that stuff that happens at home is inferior to what happens outside of the home. And I really want to challenge this idea, particularly for all of you who are discerning marriage and are trying to imagine what your life's going to be like at some point and what you want your life to look like. I really want to challenge the idea that the things that happen in the home are inferior. There are a couple quotes out there that I just think are fabulous. One is G.K. Chesterton, who is sassy. He's a sassy guy. And he said something to the effect of, why do we think that it is a noble work to go and teach other people's children the rules of three, but it is a less noble thing to teach our own children about the universe, right? I've seen it somewhere else where it's like, it is so much more precious, or why do we think that it's so good to be something to a lot of people instead of being everything to someone, right? Because to your children, moms and dads, you're everything to them. But we think that it's better somehow, instead of being everything to your children, to go be something to a lot of other people's children or a lot of other people. There's lots of different ways that we go about, or that people in the past have made quotes about this idea, this phenomenon that there's twisted logic that what happens in the home is inferior to what happens outside of the home. And so I think that there's this, watching women choose to embrace those things feels almost like we are relegating her to something less than. We're not letting her reach her potential. We're not letting her use all of her gifts to make the world a better place. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. The impact on an individual person that a mother or a father has at the home the child grows up in, we cannot overstate the importance of that. I want you to stop and think about your own childhood. Think about the things that formed you. Think about the things that made you you, the memories that were so special and precious, or the memories that were horrible and awful. And I think we can all recognize when we're looking at our own hearts, the importance of the home, the importance of our parents, the presence of someone there to be there for you. And we notice the lack of that, right? There's wounds and injury when those things aren't there for whatever reason. But when we step back for some reason, when we take this 30,000 foot view, it seems like it's better to not be there at the home, to go out and do something else great and wonderful in the world. So I just want to really challenge the idea that what's happening, what these trad wives are embracing, is somehow inferior to everything else that's happening. We need both, right? We need people out in the workforce using their gifts and earning money and contributing to culture and building up the economy. We need all that stuff. But we also need a focus and an emphasis on the beauty of the home and giving a soft place to land for people and raising children in a way that teaches them the beauty and dignity of the world so that they can then go out and use their gifts however God's calling them to. So I think that's another reason that the trad wife movement makes people uncomfortable, because we think that these people are settling for something that's not good. And the third reason that I think people are really threatened by this idea of the trad wife movement is because, to be honest, there has been a lot of oppression of women. There has been a lot of men dominating and using their masculinity in a really toxic way. And there have been a lot of women who have been on the receiving end of that and have been completely beat down, actually physically or emotionally or spiritually or whatever. And so I think there were generations of women who did those things in the home, not because of the beauty and dignity that they brought to the table and the recognition of their gifts, but because they were oppressed and felt like they didn't have any other option. And if you are threatened by the trad wife movement for that reason, or that's what stirs up in your heart whenever you think about it, I want to challenge you to just recognize that that is not God's design for masculinity and femininity. The men who behaved in that way were wrong. They were abusing their masculinity. The purpose of the masculine giftedness, the masculine genius, the masculine strength is to serve women, is to lay down his life for his bride, just like Christ. Men who didn't do that were abusing their masculinity. That, hearkening back to what I said about racism, that also has to go. It is not appropriate for men to be oppressing women, to be, belittling women, to be saying that the gifts that the women bring to the world aren't as good. So I think some people are genuinely turned off by this idea because there historically has been a lot of abusive masculinity in this way. But the answer is not to throw out the goodness and beauty of homemaking, of child rearing, of bread baking. Have you ever smelled homemade bread? It's actually really delicious smell. Don't throw that out, right? Don't reject all of that stuff just because of the bad. What we need to be doing is challenging the men and challenging that abusive masculinity and calling it on to greatness, calling the men on to greatness. The answer isn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, or the bread, as it may be, the homemade bread, out with the bathwater. The answer is to say, the way that you have been treating women is horrible. The way that you've been treating women is wrong. That has got to stop. That toxic masculinity has got to stop. And honestly, the repression of women has got to stop. That's the answer, is to challenge that and to redeem those elements of masculinity, to turn them into something good and beautiful that is living masculinity rightly, and to allow women to embrace the beauty and dignity of those elements of femininity that are wonderful, not in an oppressive way, but in a place of total freedom. So, in conclusion, why are people threatened by the trad wife movement? Well, I think, one, because we think that by embracing these things, we have to hearken back to this time in history that was very broken. We don't have to do that. Number two, I think because people invalidate the goodness and wonderfulness of the things that happen inside the home. So we need to talk about that and redeem that. And number three, because there really have been seasons of history where men were really oppressive and were abusing their masculinity, and women were on the receiving end of that and were super oppressed. All of those things, I think, are good reasons why people are uncomfortable with the trad wife movement. But the answer is not to throw the fresh baked bread out with the bathwater, like we said. The answer is to challenge those three different things and really approach those in a way that leads to authentic healing and beauty. And then if people want to be at home raising their kids and baking homemade bread, more power to you. Until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.